So I got to tell you about Eddie Wilson. All right.
Eddie Wilson. Okay.
Eddie Wilson is a former football player. He was drafted in the 1962 AFL draft, 19th overall by the Dallas Texans, who would then become the Kansas City Chiefs. He was also drafted that same year by the Detroit Lions. A couple picks later in their draft, in the NFL draft at 24th overall, he decided to play in the AFL. So he comes over to the Chiefs. He is a quarterback slash punter. That's what he did in college. Those are his skill sets back then. Kicking and punting were real crude. They had other people doing it, and there were no specialists. You can ask Bill Belichick if you want to know more about that. But the Chiefs, with Eddie Wilson's time with the Chiefs, he was mostly a backup quarterback. And then in 1963, the Chiefs were on a 5-game losing streak. They had started the year off 2-1. They lost 5 in a row. Things were floundering. He's sitting behind the quarterback. He's going, "This is my time. I gotta get in here." And they start our friend Eddie Wilson, and he's playing against the Boston Patriots, who would later become, of course, the New England Patriots. And quarterback Babe Parilli for them, who was basically, before Tom Brady, was like the best quarterback in their franchise history. He was really good. And so they're going back and forth. It's a pretty evenly matched game. Not going to go into the box score too much, but the teams are so evenly matched, in fact, that they tie. Bummer. So his first start ends up in a tie, and the Chiefs decide to go back to the starter for that year. It was Len Dawson, actually. And I forgot to mention this earlier. So Len was on the 5-game losing streak when they brought in Eddie Wilson for that game, but then they decided to go back to Len. This is early in Len's career.
Before Len was Len.
Exactly. He was obviously still a talented quarterback, but just hadn't established himself. So Eddie Wilson plays one game that year, ends in a tie, right? And then for the rest of Eddie Wilson's career, he's bouncing around. He's a Chiefs backup for a long time. And then in 1965, the Patriots trade for our friend Eddie, and they brought him in, and the papers in Boston said this is the most significant transaction in the history of the Boston Patriots. And He was Len's backup. They were real excited for him, but he wasn't quite ready to take over for Babe Parilli yet. Babe was a little bit older than him. They were going to let things go. But just like what happened with the Chiefs in 63, Boston starts out the year on a 5-game losing streak. They're 0-5, and they can't get things going. Babe's he doesn't have it anymore. So they decide, we're going to go to Len's backup, to Eddie Wilson. We're going to throw him into this game. That's a game against the San Diego Chargers, and Boston was hoping to get off the schneid, and they did get off the schneid. However, they did not get off the schneid with a win. They also tied the San Diego Chargers.
Why?
So his first 2 starts both end in ties, and then Babe Parilli starts the next game, after that, and starts the rest of the season. And Eddie Wilson never gets in a game, or never starts a game in his NFL career. So he is 0-2 as a starting quarterback. He is the only quarterback to start and never get a win or a loss in NFL history.
Bananas. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter/X at Real Bird Lawyer. Now on Blue Sky at Bird Law Expert. Not posting there yet. We'll see how things play out. If Elon falls through and has promised to make us pay, we are. I mean, I know that I threatened to quit a lot, but I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to give him money. So here with me as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on Twitter/X. What's going on, buddy?
I'm hoping that someone will end up pirating Twitter, which I never really considered. But, anything else that you have to pay for, it's pretty much free online, especially if it's a digital thing of some kind. And so what's to stop one person from botting up, paying the $8, and then just copying every tweet that comes in and spitting it out to other people for free? So that's what I think is going to happen.
That sounds like a great idea. Elon's
think I'm going to do it.
He could come after you, but I guess there's a lot of things that people could come after you for in the digital realm, and you're still kicking. You're still a free man. Don't listen to this, FBI. We're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you missed out on preseason best ball drafts, don't worry. You can still draft. You can also do the little parlays, the little teasers. I jumped into the little over-under realm on Underdog the other day, had some money in my account, decided to put it all on overs for fantasy points for offensive players in the Chiefs-Jags game. So that did not go well for me. I got my, little freebie. It was like Christian McCaffrey over 1 yard. He only needs 1 yard. So I got that leg. I did not get any of the other 4 legs. But you know what? The nice thing about best ball, nice thing about Underdog is that it's a new week every week. I'm going to get back out there this week. I'm going to play some bets. I'm going to win some money, and you guys can do that too. Use our promo code SUNNY, SUNNY. Get a matching deposit up to your first $100. And speaking of fantasy, Taylor, we have to give ourselves a pat on the back here before we even start the podcast, because we currently occupy, through 2 weeks, the top 2 spots in the standings in the Listener Dynasty Fantasy Football League. Woo! Go us.
We do. We've had a good start to the year. We're going to hope to keep the ball rolling and show these guys how to play some fantasy football.
I am the only 2-0 team in the league through 2 weeks, and you lead
crazy.
all teams in scoring. You are the highest scoring team in the league. So go us. We know ball. Congratulations, us.
We do. We knew ball, but now everyone else knows that we know ball.
Now the listeners know that we know ball, and now the listeners that are listening to this know that we know ball. We got to pour one out for our friend Nicole, the first casualty of the IASIC Cutthroat League. We have a 16-team Cutthroat League. The lowest scoring team after 2 weeks gets eliminated. It will be 1 cut every week after this. And poor Nicole could not overcome Aaron Rodgers popping his Achilles 4 snaps into his Jets debut. She certainly could not overcome it after her premier player, her star player. In a 16-team league, you got to rely on your stars. Jamar Chase, total bum, and has been a complete bust. He has fewer receiving yards than Derrick Henry through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Who's a running back who doesn't catch passes. So RIP Nicole. It was a valiant effort. You deserved better, but unfortunately, fantasy doesn't care about what we deserve, and you're gone.
She said today that she does like the fact that she can blame the Bengals for her demise because it's personal.
And Aaron Rodgers.
Right, it's personal. So that's she's been a very a staunch anti-Bengals presence on Chiefs Twitter, which is great. And she will continue that crusade.
Now it's personal. And meanwhile, in our redraft league, which we are not a part of, but we are overseeing from afar, we're commissioning. We got to give a shout out to fantasy rookie German Chief. He is 2-0. This is his first fantasy league ever, I believe. First time playing fantasy football. He drafted in the middle of the night in Germany, and he is not only undefeated at 2-0, he is leading the league in scoring. Great work by him. Amazing.
Yes, Glückwunsch to German Chief for being awesome. And he paid super close attention for when we were talking about the rules, he would DM me in Discord and be like, hey, I want to make sure I understand how the draft works, how it's set up. Like, he was bought in from day one, and we appreciate that commitment. And hopefully your first fantasy year is going to go as well as your first 2 weeks have.
If I can give you a piece of advice, German Chief, if you're listening, don't expect for your hard work to always be rewarded in fantasy football. It's amazing, and it's great that it has worked out for you. Sure. That you've been bought in, and you have clearly read up on what you're doing, and you've got strategies and you executed it. It's great that it's working for you. Don't expect that to continue. No. It is very often random acts of chance that determine our fates in fantasy football, but it's great to see him doing well in the league. Shout out to him, Dougie Fresh and Jake Fisher 4, also 2-0 in the Listener League. We are keeping an eye on them. And of course, the top 2 finishers in that league are going to be elevated into our Dynasty League, and the bottom 2 people in our Dynasty League are going to get relegated down to the Redraft League, which is going to be amazing. Speaking of amazing, we've got a great show for you guys. As always, we've got news. We've got what is happening. We've got a recap of our first win of the season. It feels so good, even though it was a terrible game. Week 2 at Jacksonville. Chiefs get the dub 17-9. We'll talk about that. And we have a game to preview. The Chiefs are taking on the Chicago Bears on Sunday. But first, well, I guess we owe an apology to Mike Florio because
no, we don't.
Patrick Mahomes got a raise. We don't. I strike that because he did say that Patrick Mahomes he did say that he would be the highest paid player in the league before week 1.
Mm-hmm.
And he is not the
Neither
highest paid player in the league, and it did not happen until after week 2.
Doing his best Benjamin Albright
He
impersonation.
is taking an L on that, but Patrick Mahomes does get an adjustment to his contract. It's not really a new contract. They simply moved some money around. They took $43 million from the last 5 years of his deal and moved it up to the next 4 years of his deal. That elevates his salary over the next 4 years for an additional, it moves him up to $208 million over the next 4 years. $208.1 million, I should say, because that puts him $100,000 over Lamar Jackson, who was the record holder for the next 4 years. It's sort of an odd benchmark, but it does give him a benchmark. He will be the highest paid player in football the next 4 seasons. So it doesn't change the annual value over the life of his deal. It does guarantee more money for him. It does put more money in his pocket right now. He is going to get a lot of that money paid out up front. And on the Chiefs side of things, they get a little bit of additional flexibility. Not that they can't still move plenty of money around because it is still, a 10-year deal. But they now have the ability to wait until May to decide if they're going to restructure his deal. So they can wait until after free agency and really right after the draft to decide how much money they're going to move out of his contract and tweak that. So it's a little bit more flexibility for the team. I've seen some reporting that said it effectively shortens the deal down to essentially, the next 4 seasons. That's kind of, I don't know. It's an odd way to look at it. Like the back half of this deal is clearly he's not going to play that out. He's now making significantly less money over the back half of his deal than he was slated originally to make, which means he's not going to play for that number. He's going to get adjusted again in 2026. Both sides are going to revisit it then. But he's still under contract. He's not going anywhere. It's not like he's going to be a free agent in 3 years. So hands off.
Here's what's annoying about that narrative. There's plenty, but when a rookie signs, you don't ever say like, oh, well, they're probably going to extend him in year 3. So it's only a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal or whatever. Like just because a date in the future that they're going to, or you guess a date in the future, who knows? Maybe the Chiefs and Mahomes are going to wait until after 27 or something like that to do their, so like, sure, they were always going to revisit this deal several times throughout the deal. They're going to revisit it more than just between 26 and 27. They're going to keep coming back and making sure that the guy that puts food on everybody's table is happy. I mean, that was exactly the breakdown. Albert Breer had a great article in Sports Illustrated about kind of how it came to be that Chris Cabot reached out to the Chiefs 2 days before the Super Bowl and was like, hey, our guy's kind of slipping down the rankings. And the Chiefs were like, hey, he brings us a Super Bowl and baby, we'll show you the money. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it's such a great business relationship between these two sides. Like very clearly they approach this as like, how can we help each other the most, which is not how these contracts always go. It's certainly not how it's gone for some of these other star quarterbacks, Lamar and Burrow and others. I mean, it's the moving from March to May is a perfect example of that, because when they set this deal up, they probably didn't even think like, because everybody kind of does March deadlines for a lot of these types of deals because that's the end of the league year. That's kind of, just a standard time to do it. And then they thought, shit, I bet this year they were sitting there in March going, Pat, we really wish we could have used this money after the draft. And then he probably was like, well, why don't we? Why don't we just rewrite the language? And I mean, I don't care. It's all guaranteed. It doesn't matter to Pat when things vest and when things guarantee. He knows he's going to be here the whole time. It's a very symbiotic relationship. And this was another example of the Chiefs just continuing to win with the highest paid player in the sports contract, which is a funny dichotomy there between paying a lot of money and it helping the team. But that's exactly what happens here.
Yeah. I mean, it's another one of those, I don't know, it gets a little bit tiresome, I guess, in a sense, to have to watch non-ball knowers. I feel like it was sort of a Groundhog Day situation where we were repeating all the narratives that we heard when he signed his 10-year extension 3 years ago, which was, oh, now the Chiefs are done. Now they're not going to be able to pay anybody. And it's like, come on, get out of here. That's a complete fantasy. It's a complete farce that these people are living out. He's going to be in Kansas City for at least another 10 years. He's going to continue to be amongst the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, and he's going to continue winning Super Bowls. Suck it, haters. Some personnel moves. The Chiefs did cut Danny Shelton from the practice squad to make room for cornerback Darius Rush, who they claimed from the Colts practice squad on cutdown day, that 2023 fifth-round pick, super athletic, and then had to make a cut for Chris Jones when he came back. So RIP Snacks. We'll see if he makes it back to the practice squad or if he gets claimed or he got cut from the practice squad. We'll see if he makes his way back to the league. What you see a lot of times with these guys that are not good enough to stick on an NFL active roster is that they frequently will make their way back to the organization in some capacity. Looking at you, CJ Spiller, just because, guys want to be, they want to be available to answer the call when a Super Bowl winning franchise gets on the phone and says, Snacks, we need you.
And that, he's obviously established, a place to live here and all that type of stuff. And it's just, if you're going to bounce from a practice squad to being inactive to a practice squad, you might as well stay in the same city, talk to the same front office every time you do it. If a team wants to put him on their 53-man roster, see ya, have fun. That's great. Good for Snacks. Right. But otherwise, if he's just going to be bounced around on practice squads, he might as well stick here and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about injuries. And we're recording this on a Wednesday. We've been a little bit sporadic with our scheduling. We're going to try and probably get these episodes out Wednesday evening, Thursday morning during the season so that we have, we're trying to strike a balance with a single show a week between getting you a timely recap of the game that happened and getting you a timely preview of the game that is yet to come. So injuries as of Wednesday. We had 5 DNPs today, did not practice. Isaiah Pacheco with a hamstring, Richie James with a knee, Kadarius Toney with a little toe injury, and Nick Bolton with an ankle, Willie Gay Jr. with a quad. So
now, when you say Kadarius Toney with a little toe injury, do you mean that
sure.
It's pinky toe?
No, what I mean is that it's probably not serious.
Okay, I thought you knew which toe it was.
No. In the macro sense, what I've read is that it is not considered serious. So gotcha. The little was a comment on the seriousness of the injury. Now, of course, being Kadarius Toney, it probably means that he will be dead by Sunday. R.I.P. Kadarius. Sure. Hopefully that is not the case because
I'll delete the episode if it is.
Richie James's that would be dark. Richie James's injury it sounds like might be a little bit more serious with the knee. And he was obviously primary punt returner. Not that he did a great job of it in Jacksonville. I'll probably touch on that in the next segment. But as of right now, I think there's hope that most of these guys are going to be able to go. L'Jarius Sneed was a limited participant on Wednesday with a knee injury. Looks like he'll be fine. Jawan Taylor, Justin Watson, and Nick Jones were all full participants. They have a shoulder, ankle, and hand injury, respectively. Yeah, Richie James looks like is going to be for sure out this week. So she's going to have to find somebody else to return punts.
Boy, that's a bummer. Yeah. Look, this punt return thing hasn't worked for a while. It really hasn't worked since Tyreek. McColl was a little dynamic and obviously had some good return moments in him, but he also gaffed some and he had the big one in the Bills playoff game that was a fumble. And then after him, Sky was obviously a disaster. Everyone involved there would have said that. There's a reason that they're not even talking about him this time as being the guy. And James goes out there, and week 1, although he didn't turn the ball over, he also didn't have any returns that were worth writing home about. And then in week 2, he drops one in the sun. I get it. You could see the shadow on the replay as it crossed over his eyes right when that ball was coming down. But you got to shield the sun if you're returning the ball and the sun's at that position in the sky,
or you got to fair catch it,
or you got to get out of the way. You can't do what he did, which is just let it hit him, and then the Jags take over in. Right. So, the punt returning thing is annoying, and hopefully, if they keep trying guys out there, maybe somebody sticks. Toney obviously has the longest punt return in Super Bowl history. I don't know if you want to put a guy that's that fragile that you're relying on offense out to be the punt returner, right?
I personally do not.
I don't either. And that's why they took Tyreek off once he was the wide receiver 1. You don't want your wide receiver 1 returning punts. You just don't. It's too much impact there. So it's annoying. Hopefully the Chiefs get it figured out here before too long.
Let's talk about
what is happening.
Boy. So after week 1, we got some time to sit and reflect on the Chiefs' dominance of the past year, and we had a little window in there, about 3 days between Thursday and Sunday, where the league got to get their shots in. The
Hmm.
champs are down. They started 0-1. They lost to the Lions at home. Look at how much their wide receivers suck. Patrick Mahomes is bad now. He's a Kelsey merchant, etc. So on and so forth. Well, week 1, Sunday rolls around. A bunch of teams that the Chiefs needed to lose or wanted to lose lost. And now we get to talk about what happened in week 2. And boy, the Denver Broncos, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Los Angeles Chargers, division rivals, and the Chiefs' principal rival in the AFC, all 0-2 after a second loss in week 2. Let's touch on these briefly. So first, the Broncos were up 21-3 in their game. They had a huge halftime lead, and they end up blowing a 21-3 lead. And they were behind in this game. They gave up, I think it was a 36-3 run.
32-3.
32-3 run to the Washington Commanders. Eric Bieniemy.
Yep.
Shout out to EB.
Yes, appreciate you, Coach.
Bringing the thunder with Sam Howell, the Fighting Sam Howell's.
Sam Howell's first career road start. He's basically a rookie. He started 2 games last year.
He was a 5th-round pick. A 5th-round, second-year quarterback in his first road game in Denver. The biggest home field advantage. Denver in September, biggest home field advantage in the league. Yeah. And they go on a 32-3 run in this game in the second half to essentially ice this game, only to have Russell Wilson come back and throw an absurd Hail Mary, which was short of the end zone, gets tipped into the end zone, and then on the 2-point conversion attempt, the Broncos fall short. They lose the game 35-33. Hilarious. It's almost better that they got a Hail Mary
100%
to get within 2 points. It's so much funnier this way. They are 0-2 with a minus 3-point differential. That has never happened in NFL history.
Has it really?
It's never happened. For a team to be 0-2 with a point differential of -3 has never happened in NFL history. The Broncos are the first team ever to accomplish this feat.
They lost by 1 point last week to the Raiders at home. So they had back-to-back home games against the Raiders and the Commanders. And, they were looking at their schedule before the season started thinking all right, we can at least start off on a good foot. We can get Sean Payton confident. We've got 2 home games at Mile High against bottom feeders. Respect to the Commanders, but it's not like they're going to scare anybody. And certainly the Raiders, everyone expects to beat them. So for them to have come out of this stretch 0-2, and now they've got Miami this week. They've got
on the road, their first
twice
road
coming
game
up in, weeks 6 and 8. It's going to get extremely ugly for Denver. We are obviously as here for that as we are for the Chiefs winning. It gives me life to watch these Broncos struggle.
Yes.
Very, very, very fun start to the year for the Denver Broncos.
Very, very, very fun start to the year for the Cincinnati Bengals as well. They came out and told James Palmer on Sunday that their game plan was 1 yard at a time. And they literally tried to carry that out in the first half when they had 2.3 yards per play. Not ideal. Not what you want. I get it. 1 game at a time. That makes sense.
Yeah.
1 yard at a time. That's not a good offensive strategy.
Unless you have infinite downs, that's not going to work.
That doesn't make sense. That's a 4 and out. Okay.
Yeah.
Every single time. All right. You're gaining 4 yards and you're punting, or you're turning it over on downs. Yeah. You're gaining 3 yards and you're punting it on 4th and 7. Not a good game plan. They did find their stride a little bit in the second half of this game, and they were able to make it close against the Ravens, who were banged up. Except that they still fall short. They lose this game by 3 points. And critically, Joe Burrow tweaks his injured calf muscle. It's not clear whether he will be available this week to play against the Rams on Monday Night Football. Surprisingly feisty Rams squad that's 1-1. At this point, it seems like this is something that is going to linger for several games. If they don't sit him down, it's something that he could certainly re-aggravate again, or God forbid, the calf injury, those are a torn Achilles waiting to happen. If you don't let it get right, that is frequently what you see, a calf issue leading to an Achilles tear, and then he would be out for the year. So they are really playing with fire here. They're in a desperate situation. They're in an 0-2 hole, and they lost both of these games to division opponents, in Cleveland and Baltimore. Baltimore's 2-0. So they're already essentially 2.5 games back of Baltimore in the North after 2 weeks.
So, that's right, because Cleveland lost. Yeah, you're
Cleveland
exactly
lost,
right.
But still,
the calf thing is something that people brought up when Rodgers got hurt because he had been complaining about his calf in training camp. And that you're right. You're absolutely right that is kind of a one injury leads to another. We're not saying Joe Burrow's definitely going to injure his Achilles, but boy, if so many things hadn't happened, they could afford to sit him and feel good about it. If A, they hadn't lost to division opponents, 2 of them. B, they hadn't talked all that shit because they talk all that shit constantly. 3, they hadn't paid Joe Burrow a shitload of money, the most money anyone's ever gotten for anything. And 4, if they weren't just 0-2 in general, they're desperate for a win. And to be backed into a corner and then have to decide, is it more important for us to basically tank the season or to put Joe Burrow out there? And then if he gets hurt, guess what's going to happen?
$500 million quarterback.
And tank the season. Like they're kind of between a rock and a hard place there. And it's just, a lot of people when projecting or predicting the AFC playoffs, there were only so many mouths to feed in the AFC. You just couldn't get all these good teams all into the playoffs and winning all the games and stuff. And I saw several, people talking about either the Bills or the Bengals as 2 of those teams that they just don't know if they still have it in them to continue to be perennial contenders. And now that the Bengals are sitting here 0-2, I mean, they do look very ripe to take a step back this year, which is shocking. It's shocking considering where they'd been the couple years before that, and kind of
back-to-back AFC Championship game participants.
Exactly, and what they meant to the Chiefs rivalry. Like, when you think about where the Chiefs have been with some of these other teams, there have been moments where a lot of these other teams have felt like the number one team in the Chiefs kind of, it was obviously Brady when he was with the Patriots. For a while, it was the Texans when Deshaun was actually good for a second. Clearly, the Bills for a good stretch there were the Chiefs' kind of number one comparison. Bengals now for the last 2 years. It's been so keep them coming. Let's go. Let's see if maybe Anthony Richardson and the Colts want to get up there or something like that. Miami. I'm sure Tyreek and Tua want to be the next guys to kind of compare themselves to the Chiefs. It's just really funny how one team always stays the same and one quarterback always stays the same, and then the other side is just this rotating carousel of people that want to come up and try and mess with us, and it just never works.
Speaking of teams and quarterbacks that always stay the same, but not in a good way, unlike the Chiefs. Boy, let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. Oh my goodness. The Los Angeles Chargers are also 0-2. They have a point differential of -5 on the year. They've lost by 2 points and 3 points in their first 2 games. And they fall on the road to the Tennessee Titans, who are 1-1. The Titans are not good this year. No. They have probably one of the worst rosters in the NFL against the always hyped, always ballyhooed Chargers roster. The Chargers in this game, I mean, they had a chance. They had multiple chances to win this game. They had at one point, as they almost always do, they had an 11-point lead in this game, an 11-0 lead in this game, which is weird and wild. They went for a 2-point conversion on their first touchdown
penalty on the extra point. We've seen that a couple times this week.
Sure. But they were down 3 with 2 minutes left in this game. And credit to Justin Herbert, he's able to lead a game-tying field goal drive in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left. Mm-hmm. But you have to look at what he didn't do on this drive. And what he didn't do is win the game, because he gets the ball down to, they had 1st and 10 at the Tennessee 14 with a minute left in this game. And they get a 3-yard gain. They're down to the Tennessee 10. It says 3 yards in the box score, but anyway.
They got 4, 1st and 10 from the 14, they got 4. Then second and 6 from the 10, they got 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on 3rd and 2 from the Tennessee 7, again with 20 seconds left in the game. I mean, you've got time to take a couple of shots at the end zone. They still have 2 timeouts left at this point. So, I mean, 21 seconds, 3rd and 2 from the Tennessee 7, score a touchdown, win the game.
Finish
and instead, Justin Herbert takes a sack from Harold Landry for 8 yards, putting them in a 4th and 10, 4th and goal from the 10. So they have to kick the field goal to tie the game, send it to overtime. They win the coin toss. So, for the second week in a row, we see a Chiefs opponent that has fallen to the Chiefs in overtime before win the coin toss.
Saying and all we need is that ball first. That's all I want.
Go 3 and out, 3 straight incomplete passes, and then the Tennessee Titans and Ryan Tannehill, Tajay Spears, and Derrick Henry march down the field and kick a game-winning field goal to put the Chargers in an 0-2 hole. They are allowing 10 yards per play on defense, which is the worst in the NFL by a huge margin. I mean, every time somebody passes against the Chargers, they're getting a first down, essentially, which is utterly bananas.
They're such an enigma, but not really. So it's like on one hand, they trick everybody. And on the other hand, they shouldn't trick anybody because we all know that the Chargers have the same DNA in them that they've had for years now. And on the other hand, you just keep thinking when every year starts, like, all right, they got to kick this at some point. It doesn't really matter what laundry you're wearing. It's new people. It's new this. It does. It does in this case. You know, Lombardi's a perfect example. Joe Lombardi leaves the Chargers and he goes to Denver, and their offense continues to dink and dunk and do these weird little and now they have Kellen Moore, who was, telling Dallas was slinging it all over the yard last year, and Kellen Moore comes in and he's like, Herbert, why aren't you throwing these big deep balls with your huge arm? And he just won't do it. And they can't win close games. They don't know what they're doing. They're poorly coached. They're injury prone. Obviously, Austin Eckler missed this game, which is just par for the course for the Chargers. I mean, get any superstar in there. Guaranteed Keenan Allen's going to miss time. Wouldn't be surprised if Justin Herbert misses time this year. Like they're snake bitten, and they certainly don't piss me off the way these other two teams did, the Broncos and Bengals. But there's this level of just like, all is right in the world when the Chargers are struggling. Like, even though I don't really hate them, I still feel like, okay, as long as the Chargers are doing poorly, everything is going the way it should. And this is, man, between these two, between the Broncos and the Chargers, to be 0-4 with a -8 point differential in those 4 games. I mean, that's as good as it gets. Like, that's so hard to do unless you're specifically those two teams. And then it's extremely easy to do.
It's amazing that the Broncos are the first team ever to start 0-2 with a -3 point differential, and the Chargers are only 2 points off of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chargers have to be one of a very small handful of teams that have started 0-2 with a -5 point differential.
Yeah, agreed.
It's really hard to start the year losing back-to-back games by essentially a field goal or less. And these two teams have managed to both do it in our division. We are truly blessed. Teams that are not blessed in the AFC, the other 0-2 teams, the New England Patriots, the only team besides the Broncos to start 0-2 with both of those games being at home.
Yep.
They are cooked. They're probably going to be irrelevant. And the Houston Texans, who we knew were going to be irrelevant, but yikes, they traded away their first-round pick next year, which currently would be the 2nd or 3rd overall pick.
Sure.
Currently, the Broncos hold all the tiebreakers. They currently sit, they're on the clock right now, season end of the day, which we hope it won't, because we don't need the Broncos to be getting Caleb Williams. But let's talk about the 2-0 AFC teams. It's the Baltimore Ravens, who, of course, just knocked off the Bengals, and the Miami Dolphins, who will take on, I mean, the Dolphins are going to be 3-0. They're playing the Broncos in Miami this week.
Yep.
But Ravens Dolphins, I mean, it's interesting. You kind of already alluded to this, but with Tua and Tyreek, they're kind of making the leap. This is their first opportunity, their first real opportunity to establish themselves as the Chiefs foil in the AFC. It's been the Ravens, and it's been the Bills, and it's been the Bengals, but it hasn't been the Dolphins yet. This is kind of their first opportunity. On the other hand, I mean, for the Ravens, now it feels like we're recycling our trash here, because it was the Ravens in 2019 that was the number 1 seed, the team that went 14-2, the team that the Chiefs were going to have to beat to go to the Super Bowl. And the Chiefs didn't even end up playing them because they get beat in their first playoff game, coming off their playoff bye, by the Tennessee Titans. And the Chiefs have to play the Titans at home for a chance to go to their Super Bowl, and they win it. So I don't know what to make of either of these teams. Obviously, the Dolphins, if they can stay healthy, look really dangerous. Lamar in the new look offense there in Baltimore that's letting him throw the ball around the yard looks pretty good. They've been solid, and their defense is always pretty good. So I don't know what to make of these 2-0 AFC teams. Either of these teams jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins. I think that the two most impactful people between those two teams are Tyreek Hill and Mike McDaniel. I think
Sure.
they are absolutely, I mean, he's a wizard with the play design and play calling. Tyreek's the fastest human on the planet. It's a great combo. And if Tua can, keep his head in his helmet and not miss any time and do the stuff that he's been kind of doing the last couple of years, I mean, they're absolutely as good of a threat as the Chiefs have seen out of any of these teams in the last 5 years. Obviously, none of those teams have been a big enough threat for it to matter a ton, but like the Dolphins with Tyreek having the personal, I'm sure when he plays the Chiefs, it's going to be nuts in Germany. But I think the Ravens are very beatable. We've seen that the Chiefs have had a good plan against Lamar for Lamar's whole career, and they've been getting hurt a lot. They've missed defenders now out for the year already, and J.K. Dobbins is out for the year already. And I mean, they're already, even though they're 2-0, certainly feeling it. So I think the Dolphins. I think that right now, if I had to gun to my head, who's the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC this year, I think I would say the Dolphins.
You already mentioned that the Chiefs will play the Dolphins later this year in Germany. It'll be an interesting one. Can't wait to see that contest. One little other bit of AFC news. Nick Chubb out for the year. Just an awful, ghastly knee injury. If you haven't seen it, don't look for it. Don't watch it. It's gross. It's horrible. Prayers up for him. And Kareem Hunt in to spell Jerome Ford. He's probably going to end up being the backup there because they obviously made the conscious choice to let him go, and he was unemployed through 2 weeks of the season, Kareem was, but he is back in Cleveland. Based on what I watched of the Browns, which was just Monday Night Football this week, I just don't see how that team is going to be in the final 7 in the AFC without Nick Chubb, who's one of the few running backs in the league that probably does matter at least a little bit. He's one of the most efficient runners of this era. A guy
used
that
him a shitload too.
Yeah, and I mean, he was the offense, and now it's Deshaun Watson's offense, which, yikes. Did you see that the Steelers were the first team in NFL history, I believe, to be losing in the fourth quarter, put up negative offensive yardage in the fourth quarter and win the game?
Amazing. No.
They had negative 3 yards in the fourth quarter, and they entered the fourth
defensive
quarter
touchdown.
down a score and ended up winning the game on a defensive touchdown. Yikes, Browns. Chiefs will not see them this year unless they see them in the playoffs, but that does not seem very likely at all. Let's talk about week 2. Chiefs traveled to Jacksonville, a place where they have had success in the Andy Reid era, as we discussed in the preview. And boy, this was just a weird, frustrating, horrible game, except the Chiefs won, so it was also magical and beautiful and wonderful. 17-9, Chiefs over Jaguars. Your initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah. I mean, I think that initial, you're beautiful and horrible at the same time. It was frustrating. It was weird. It was great to pull out a road win against a team that you just had a really gritty game against in the playoffs the year before. You knew they were juiced to play the Chiefs. You knew that Doug Peterson and everybody involved there really, really, really wanted that game against the Chiefs. Everybody wants the game against the Chiefs, right? But like when you beat somebody in the playoffs, they really, really want the game against you.
Yeah, I mean, this is the third time in a calendar year.
Yeah, exactly. This is a kind of a little Bengals thing brewing between the Chiefs and the Jags, but it was everything that a big time matchup should have been, except for the play on the field. Everything else was big. I mean, the fact that, the Jags were opening up, I mean, this was their home opener. Their fans were, excited to finally get one back at the Chiefs after last year. They've been waiting all year for this game. And then the first 5 possessions go punt between both teams. I mean, it was just, neither team could get anything going. Huge credit to the Chiefs on this game. This is maybe the best performance by the Chiefs defense in the Patrick Mahomes era. Maybe. I mean, I'd have to go back and think if I could remember one that was just this complete against a team that absolutely had the pieces to shred you. I mean, Jacksonville's a hell of an offense. I was so impressed by the way that the defense held them down.
Yeah, we'll break down some of those performances when we talk about our awards, the numbers, figures, and of course the Chiefs system, bringing that back since this is our first one of the year. But before we get into that, I mean, yeah, it just was a strange performance by the Chiefs. Obviously, getting Chris Jones and Travis Kelce back was huge. Both of them were contributors in this game. It was Patrick Mahomes' 28th birthday. It's great to get him out of there with the win. But let's talk about the numbers, the figures. And this is a segment where we sort of dive into some of the statistics that explain the game, that tell the tale of what happened on Sunday. First one I got for you is from the Ringer's Shokapadia. Sunday was the Chiefs' lowest offensive success rate in 96 starts with Patrick Mahomes. It was 96th out of 96.
Wow.
Week 1 ranked 92nd in that sample. So both games were obviously worse than any KC performance last season. He editorializes it's still Mahomes/Reed. They're 1-1. Definitely a rocky start for that offense. I'm encouraged by this stat because the offense is not going to stay bad. I mean, the offense is going to be better. And I would be curious to see where the Chiefs' 96th game in success rate ranks amongst all NFL games in that span. Because know it's not
probably
dead,
96th.
Sure, it's dead last for the Chiefs, but it certainly is not dead last in the NFL. I mean, it wasn't surprising to learn that this was the Chiefs' worst offensive performance. It obviously was one of their lower points outputs to Patrick Mahomes' era. They had that amazing streak where they were scoring 26 every game. Mm-hmm. They had a 23-plus streak that survived into the 2019 season. And they put up an impressive streak last year, too, where they were putting up points in every game. But, I mean, the Chiefs were able to move the ball in this game. So I'm a little bit surprised from a success rate standpoint that now, obviously, there were a number of turnovers, failed drives, stalled drives. But, kind of an interesting little situation for the offense. Not a good performance.
No, not a good performance. The whole, Chiefs are going to light up the scoreboard every single time. I think we're kind of past that point just with this team and with the way that they're constructed right now on offense, especially without a person like Tyreek Hill. Obviously Kelsey can light it up, but he was coming back. He was a little banged up. And 17 points. There have only been 4 games since 2018 in the Patrick Mahomes era that the Chiefs scored fewer than 17. And one of those, he was not playing. It was the Green Bay loss. And so yes, it was concerning that so many possessions ended without points. There were a couple turnovers we'll talk about that were dumb and too many field goal attempts, which just don't end up working out when you're trying to put up points. But
and sometimes not enough field goal attempts.
Yes, right. Yeah,
the Chiefs punted from the 37-yard line in this game.
Yeah, right.
From the Jacksonville 37-yard line.
Right. But on the other hand, sometimes the circumstances of a game are set up to where you're not going to score a lot of points. And whether that's the heat and humidity in Jacksonville, it was extremely hot and muggy there. Whether it's your number one and really only offensive weapon coming off of a deep bone bruise, a good defense. The Jags have a pretty good defense. They made the playoffs. They won the division last year. They certainly are feisty. I don't know if they're a top 7 or 8 defense or whatever, but they're a feisty defense. They had some guys, and their Josh Allen, the better Josh Allen, had a really good game rushing the passer. And so they did some nice things. You got to credit, I sound like a coach, you got to credit the other team sometimes when you don't come out with as many points as you wanted, and they get paid to stop the football too. But I agree with you that I'm encouraged because it doesn't feel like this is a team that's capable of a really big down swoon in offense because of Reed and Mahomes. Because as long as they have them with a little sprinkle and a little Kelsey, that they just feel like that type of team that they're going to figure it out. They've always figured out the last 5 years. They end up figuring it out. Yeah, they've had especially that 2021 stretch where for a couple games, they kind of looked like this. They were scoring high teens, low 20s. They weren't really, lighting things up. And then lo and behold, something clicked and they took off again. So yes, I do think it is encouraging. The fact that these 2 games are 2 of the 5 worst games in the Mahomes era, and they're 1-1 against 2 good teams, 2 playoff teams potentially.
Right. And they should have won the first game. I mean, they
one
lost
play
the first
difference
game by
than they would have.
1 point.
Yeah.
So let me give you some pass rush numbers from this game. So we'll start with PFF and we'll start with Chris Jones. He had a 92.8 PFF grade, which was first in week 2 among interior defensive linemen.
Seems good.
He had that's out of 100, by the way. So, anything above 90 is considered the elite, but the elite by PFF. 91.7 pass rush grade, which also first among all interior defensive linemen in the NFL. 6 pressures, also first among all defensive linemen in the NFL. And a 40.7 pass rush win rate, again, first among all defensive linemen in the NFL. bear in mind that this is a guy that came off the couch with no training camp and not even a full week of practice because he signed on Tuesday, I think it was.
Yeah. Yep.
And came in, obviously he's in great shape. He's ready to go. But a guy that didn't go through training camp, going down to Jacksonville in those conditions, and he did all this on 34 snaps. So 6 pressures, that's a counting stat, folks. And what we know about counting stats is the more opportunities you have to accrue counting stats, the higher those numbers are going to be. He led all interior defensive linemen in pressures. He only played like half of the snaps in this game, less than half the snaps.
He's incredible.
He's unbelievable.
He's incredible. Yeah.
Got one from Zach Eisen on 2023 first rounder Felix Anaduke-Uzama, FAU. Through 2 weeks, he has 4 pressures. That's tied for third on the Chiefs on 28 pass rush snaps. So he has a pressure rate at this point of 14.3%. That's second best on the team behind Chris Jones. I just told you Chris Jones has a 40% pass rush rate, but usually the league leader settles in around 22, 23, 24%. So
yeah,
anything above, I mean, last year, aside from Chris Jones, I don't think the Chiefs had hardly anybody in double digits. And so FAU to be at 14.3% through 2 games as a rookie, really strong numbers from him.
Yeah, we talked about that when the Chiefs picked him as something that he did well at K-State, which was the percentage of his pass rush attempts that turned into pressures was extremely high. I mean, he always converted rush attempts into pressures. That was kind of his superpower there. And clearly he, I don't know if this is a heater for him or if this is kind of more of where we expect him to be for his career, which would be incredible and would be a great use of a first round pick, which would be a first for the Chiefs in a while. But yeah, it's fun. And it's very, very needed because boy, with all the talent, all the talented offensive lines, talented quarterbacks out there, you just got to be able to rush the passer. And while Chris Jones is incredible, if they double team him and then you've got a guy like FAU being able to scream around the edge, good luck.
Boy, speaking of first round picks, another Chiefs first round edge rusher, George Karlaftis, who was picked in the first round last year in 2022, had 6 sacks as a rookie. He had one and a half sacks in this game. That's a career high for him. And just the way that he looked on those sacks, this is not really a number figure, but boy, look at the bend in that pass rush. He's been working with Bobby Stroup, Mahomes' trainer, to get a little bit more flexibility. Something that I know when we talked with Dan Harms and Craig Stout when he was drafted, that was something that we saw in his earlier college tape was a bendier, more flexible pass rusher. And then he sort of morphed into this hulking monster that was more of a power rusher, which is what we saw from him last year. And that was fine. He certainly, 6 sacks as a rookie is nothing to sneeze at. But a lot of those were just effort plays. The motor is still there. The effort is still there. But now he seems to have just more speed, more bend. And boy, if the Chiefs hit on back-to-back first round pass rushers, yikes.
Yeah, and I should bring this up. I was talking shit on Clyde specifically when I said it's been a while since the Chiefs have hit on that. Obviously, the 3 after Clyde were McDuffie, Karlaftis, and Felix. So,
sure.
I'm super high on all 3 of those players, and I think that they clearly have shown that Clyde was more of an aberration than anything. I'm sure someone listening to that was like, "Come on, man, Trent's our best defensive player." I get it. I'm not talking any shit on Trent McDuffie. I love the kid. But yeah, George, it's great to see. It's great to see that he feels more comfortable. A couple of the interviews that we've heard from him, either in camp or so far in the season, he's always brought up and talked about how he now knows what to expect in his routine and in the preparation for the games and what the game atmospheres are like. It's got to be terrifying to be an NFL rookie on some level. Obviously, some of those guys are insane and confident and all that stuff. But if you're a normal human thinking about walking into an NFL stadium, performing in front of millions of people on TV, sure, getting, all these elite athletes running into it seems crazy. And I'm sure there's a little bit of that for a lot of rookies. And George was probably kind of starstruck last year. And now he's coming in and he's got Furious George mode on, and it just looks great so far.
Been working with Tamba Hali on his pass rush
Right.
moves. And, I don't want to make that comparison, but you squint
sure
a little bit. That one play where he gets around the edge, that bend.
Yes.
I looked a little bit familiar. One final one on the Chiefs pass rush from Bron Kopp over at Arrowhead Pride. Per PFF, Leo Chenal 8 snaps as a pass rusher on Sunday. That's the most he's ever had in a game. He tallied 4 pressures, all hurries on 8 snaps. So now Leo Chenal, who we talked about, I mean, literally one of the most athletic linebackers ever drafted in the history of the draft, a 99.9 percentile athlete at the linebacker position. They're turning him into a situational edge rusher, which is something that, again, we talked about with both Harms and Craig, kind of talked about his potential in that role. And boy, I mean, it seems like, obviously there were flashes last year with all of these guys, except for FAU, who wasn't on the team. But I mean, all of the rookies last year, the Chiefs drafted on the defense, it was rookie heavy defense. They gelled. Chiefs won the Super Bowl with them. But it seems like all of these guys have taken a step forward in addition to FAU hitting the ground running. It's crazy. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I saw several ball knowers talk about how Chenal was at times the best linebacker on the field in that game. And that's such a leap forward from a guy that was a physical toolsy project type of linebacker that obviously he had a fantastic Super Bowl. Everyone knew that. He basically had the best game of his rookie year in his last game. And then he used that momentum to carry himself forward through training camp. And he's got great linebackers around him between Bolton, Gay, and Tranquil. I mean, that linebacker, those 4 are
that's crazy.
They could go toe to toe with any of these great linebacker groups the Chiefs have ever had. And yes, I do mean that. I mean, they are all dudes, and Leo's showing that he's got plenty of chops himself. Really exciting. I don't know how easy that rotation would be with all these guys playing so well right now, but it's a good problem to have.
Great problem to have. Let's switch back over to the offensive side from Austin Gale. Patrick Mahomes' average time to throw through 2 games, 2.89 seconds, is the longest it's been in any season of his career. That speaks obviously to, the wide receivers, and we're not seeing the guys get open, and Patrick Mahomes having the trust to hit those guys that we would like to see. Now, obviously, you kind of already alluded to it. Travis Kelce clearly not 100% on Sunday, working his way back. Obviously still not 100% from the injury. And then you add the rust on top of that, this being the first game of the season for him. Not a guy that is taking training camp off by any means, but certainly taking it easier than he would have. Shaking some rust off there. But I mean, Patrick Mahomes has been having to hold on to the ball. And you popped another stat in here, pass block win rate for the offensive line through week 2. Chiefs are first in the NFL in pass block win rate at 78%. So the Chiefs offensive line has been incredibly sturdy, and they've been giving him time to throw. And that doesn't mean that every play he's sitting back in the pocket for 3 seconds waiting for somebody to break open. Right. We've still seen him leave the pocket. We've still seen him hold on to the ball and try and create plays. But, I mean, the Chiefs are giving him the opportunity to stay in the pocket. The offensive line is giving him the opportunity to stay in the pocket. And, I think a lot of this is it's just a trust thing, and it's just an experience thing. And both with the receivers and the offensive line, I mean, the tools are all there. He's still able to avoid pressure at the best rate in the league in terms of not turning pressure into sacks. He's taken 1 sack all year, and he's been pressured a ton. But despite that, the offensive line is still winning in pass blocking mode. It's an interesting pairing of stats. The line is doing a good job protecting. Mahomes has had plenty of time to throw. I think
check out the 3rd worst team in pass block win rate through 2 weeks.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. The Cincinnati Bengals, 39%. Not good.
39%? That is
it's weird. It's crazy.
I mean, they upgraded at tackle.
I know one guy on the offensive line doesn't make an entire offensive line, but I remember they brought in a premier left tackle. Anyway, these stats, I think all that to say that I think this is going to get worked out eventually. I got another one for you. This one I just pulled on StatHead before the game. Teams that lost the turnover battle by 2+, so had 2 or more turnovers more than their opponent, and had over 90 penalty yards since 2000, 32 and 190 before Sunday. Chiefs are the 33rd team to win under those conditions. Obviously, you're putting yourself in a pretty deep hole where you're giving the opponent the ball 2 more times than they're giving it to you. and you're racking up 90 penalty yards. Chiefs actually had 92 penalty yards in this game, or excuse me, 94 penalty yards in this game. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to win when you're losing the turnover battle and you are racking up that many penalties, and the Chiefs were able to pull it off.
32 and 190 is a 14% win rate. That is
It's
not ideal. No,
it's not good.
I have a question for you. I pulled
Yes.
this number beforehand. So the Chiefs held the Jaguars to 9 points, right? Since 2018, aka the Patrick Mahomes era, the Chiefs rank where in the NFL in games allowing 9 or fewer out of 32?
Oh my God. I mean, it's got to be close to the bottom. Obviously, the team in 2018 obviously was not doing it at all. And even the years that the Chiefs have had a good defense, it's because the Chiefs are such a good prolific offense. I mean, even if the defense has a good game, you're putting the opponent in catch-up mode. You're playing a little bit soft, towards the end of the game. I mean, I honestly can't even recall that many games off the top of my head where we've allowed 9 or fewer points. I'm going to say we're 30th.
So that's why I brought this up, because I'm now going to show you the standings. They are 6th in the NFL.
6th?
In number of games allowing 9 points or fewer since 2018.
Oh my
this
God,
was insane to me, because I looked it up because I was like, how many times have they done it? Where are they sitting? They've got to be exactly the thoughts that you were going through. It can't be very many. Have the Bob Sutton defense, even when they, their shootouts, all this type of stuff is going through my head. But they have had 11 games since 2018 allowing 9 points or fewer. And that's 6th in the NFL behind New England, Baltimore, New Orleans, San Francisco, and Buffalo. So when the defense is cooking, when they're beating a team, they usually hold them down. But when you do in that same exact time period, 2018 to now, in just points allowed per game, just a flat take the points divided by the games, they're 19th in the NFL. So they're much closer to, that's bottom half, whereas 6 is a top 5 or top 5th of the NFL. So yeah, their average games are certainly much higher on defense, but every now and then you get a game like this Jags game where the Chiefs come in and they just have the other team's number. That shows coaching. That shows that whatever the Jags were doing, the Chiefs were prepared for it. I was really impressed by that number because it was the exact opposite of what I thought it would be.
Yeah, and it speaks to Steve Spagnuolo being in his bag, because really, week 1, without Chris Jones, they allowed 14 points. And, one of those drives, they got to stop, and the Lions converted on the fake punt attempt and then did drive the length of the field and score a touchdown. So, I mean,
right.
still on the defense to some degree, but they did get a stop there.
They got to stop. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then obviously we'll talk about it, but some of those drives where the Jags got close in this game, the Chiefs were awful at preventing red zone touchdowns the last couple of years. I mean, they were on a huge streak last year where it was like 20 plus in a row that the opponents, once they got into the red zone, they finished with a touchdown, and the Jags went over in this game. So it was just really impressive. We're going to get to the Chief system now, which is only something that we do when the Chiefs win, but they win in a system. They have a formula. They have a profile, and this game fit the profile. Of course, the Chiefs stands for create drama, handle adversity, inspire hope, engage physically, finish strong, separate entirely. That is the Chief system. Shout out to the Dennis system on Always Sunny. We're going to start with create drama. C. Richie James had that handled himself. He fumbled after the Chiefs punted on 4th and 9 from the 37, as you mentioned earlier. He after they punted to the Jags, then the Jags punted back to the Chiefs, but Richie James let the sun play him and hit him in the face. Jags jumped on it, but as we were just talking about with the Chiefs, they handled adversity because they held the Jags right there to a field goal when they already started in the red zone, and then the Chiefs fumbled again. Justin Watson kind of, I don't know if I really agree with this fumble call. It kind of hit the ground and squirted out. And I mean, it was a fumble, but it was anyway. Chiefs fumbled, but they get a Jags fumble on the very first play of that ensuing drive on a successful challenge. Great challenge by Andy. Backwards pass that the Chiefs picked up, and initially the refs called it an incomplete pass. Andy throws the flag, and it was clearly about a yard behind the intended target and backwards. It wasn't right. Exactly. So Chiefs handle adversity there by getting a takeaway after they had just fumbled the ball again. Inspire hope. Our guy, Sky Moore, we've talked about him a lot. certainly had struggles in week one. This week, he gets a beautiful back shoulder ball, one of the best back shoulder throws Mahomes has thrown to anybody, in the corner of the end zone for a 9-yard touchdown. The Chiefs took the lead in a game that, as we'll talk about, they really had no business leading other than the defense was balling out. But so they inspired hope by Sky Moore scoring his first regular season touchdown of his career. He obviously had the Super Bowl touchdown. They then engaged physically. Chris Jones, we just talked about him a lot. There was a 4th and 5 at the 45 that the Jags went for. Sack, cha-ching, picking up one step closer to that $1 million bonus for all those 10 sacks that he's going for. I mean, he's got to be the motor that we talked about when he signed this deal and all those incentives. I mean, dude's got to just be out there going a mile a minute more than he already was, because he clearly looked, juiced, inspired. Love to see that performance out of Chris Jones.
Contract year is undefeated.
Contract year, and an incentive-laden contract year? You kidding me?
He's not just playing for his next contract. He's playing to make back
for his current contract.
That is bozo agents
lost. An indentured servant. I mean, it's crazy.
It's basically a double contract year.
It is. So shout out to the Therese Paylor contract year is undefeated. Separate entirely, finish strong. Of course, got to have the F. Finish strong. The Chiefs were up 8, and a Justin Reed DPI on defense gave the Jags 1st and goal at the 1, down 8 late in the game. Lawrence loses.
Before you go into this, can I just say, by the way, you can't. I don't know what the percentages are on this, but in my mind, every time DPI gets called in the end zone, it's a touchdown. I literally, what I was thinking when they threw that flag, I was like, what is even the point of the penalty? Because if you give the opponent 1st and goal at the 1, they're going to score a touchdown 100% of the time. Excuse me. Continue.
They answered that question for you of what is the point, because it is not 100% of the time. Trevor Lawrence went back 3 yards on a run, threw 2 incomplete passes, and on 4th and goal at the 4, they kicked field goal. So they cut the 8-point lead to 5, and they were hoping, obviously, to get a stop by the Chiefs, and then they could march down the field and score a touchdown to take the lead. That clearly didn't happen, but that was a big stand. That was the biggest defensive stand of the game, protecting a touchdown +2 lead and having 1st and goal at the 1 and not giving it up for a team that, again, has struggled so mightily holding teams out of the end zone in the recent past. That was a miracle, honestly, to keep them out there. I don't know what the Jags were doing on offense. They had some poor looks. They had, of course, we haven't really talked about it, but about 3 plays, maybe 4, where one receiver, Zay Jones, twice and Calvin Ridley once, tapped 1 foot, didn't get them both down. It's not college. Got to get them both down. So then they do separate entirely. The Jags get down to a 1st and 10 at the 14 on the next possession, but they throw 2 incomplete passes, and then FAU and Chris Jones split a sack, and the ball goes out of bounds, rolls 2 yards backwards. They had 4th and 10 from the 16. Final heave into the end zone was incomplete. Chiefs then, of course, to separate entirely, when they get the ball back with 4 minutes and 18 seconds left, they have to milk the whole clock out. We've seen them pull this off much more often than I would have expected, to be able to sit there with 5 minutes left in the game. They did it in the Super Bowl. They've done it several times. They milked the whole 4:18, including the ridiculous 3rd and 6 to Sky Moore by Patrick Mahomes. He was drifting around, found Sky, hit him for 54 yards. It was a vintage Mahomes, and really the first major play that wasn't a Super Bowl touchdown by Sky Moore in his career, and the punt return in the AFC Championship game. Shout out to Sky. So that was separated entirely. That is the Chiefs system. The Chiefs systemed it up in this game for sure.
We love the Chiefs system. It's the first Chiefs system of the year, 2023, and here's to hearing a lot more from the Chiefs system. A lot more Chiefy wins. Let's do our award segment. It's also Always Sunny inspired for those of you who may be first-time listeners to the podcast. We've got 5-star men. Five-star man! Or 5-star man! Who, through their play, shout, I'm a 5-star man. We've got trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who are eating garbage all over the field. And we got wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who, of course, are capable of anything. Starting with our 5-star men, I'll take the obvious choice in this game. I'll take Chris Jones. We've already talked about it. We've already talked about what an impact he had on this game. It's crazy because, week 1, his absence was certainly felt, but the Chiefs could have won that game without him and should have won that game without him. And so his presence was if he had been there, the Chiefs almost certainly do win. So it was a sufficient condition for the Chiefs to win if he had been there, but it wasn't necessary. The Chiefs could have beaten the Lions without him.
Yeah,
they,
certainly.
They didn't do it. The Chiefs probably don't win this game without Chris Jones. In fact, they don't win this game without Chris Jones. And, I mean, that's why he's back. That's why they were able to get something worked out. It's amazing to me that, and I loved his comments. We didn't talk about this, but when he was at his first presser, after he signed his new contract, he obviously was getting asked over and over how many snaps he's going to play on Sunday. And he was kind of like, I don't know. We'll see when we get out there. And you can tell just by his attitude and like the grin on his face. He's like, yeah, I'm going to play.
They're not keeping me off.
And I'm going to play a bunch of snaps and they're not going to be able to stop me. I mean, you could just tell he was ready to go. He was a monster in this game. An excellent 5-star performance from Chris Jones.
It was. Absolutely. Love that guy. Love him back in the building. Really, really hope they work something out long term. Just the Chiefs are better. Chris Jones. They're just clearly better. My 5-star man for this game is going to be Sky Moore. Just kind of talked about him on that back shoulder touchdown, but also that 3rd and 6, that big monster 54-yarder. He only had those 3 catches, that plus one more for 70 yards total, but it was the good vibes that he needed. It was the good vibes to get back in after a pitiful, awful, terrible week 1 where he couldn't get open. And when he was open, he dropped it, and we're not going to talk about it because he's a 5-star man this week. He was great. That really long one was a game-winning catch. If the Chiefs had to punt, if he drops that one or doesn't get open on that play, and the Chiefs have to give the ball back to the Jags with a couple minutes up 8, you're looking at a potential overtime game there. So big play by Sky, big on the touchdown. Love to see that kind of bounce back game from him.
Yeah, huge. I mean, this was an evolution for him, and for Mahomes to be comfortable throwing him the ball on the 3rd and 6, to ice the game, 54 yards down the field. Huge play by him, and a good play by him because that's all improvisational. I mean, that was a scramble that obviously was not where he was designed to be on his route. Just as the quarterback is running for his life, and you just have to get to an empty space on the field and hope that the quarterback sees you and gets you the ball. And that's exactly what happened. So big props for Sky. Trashman. This feels like kicking a guy when he's down, but at this point, as long as the Chiefs put him on the field, I feel like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is essentially penciled in, practically inked in for a trash man every week that he's on the field. He had 1 carry in this game for 0 yards. So, his impact was minimal. 2 targets, 2 receptions for 17 yards. That did include, a 10-yard gain. I mean, he picked up the first down in there, but he isn't doing anything. And, Pacheco has been coming off an injury. He's kind of been on a pitch count a little bit. But, Pacheco busted out a 30-plus yard run in this game. And I can literally count on one hand. I don't have the number in front of me, but I know for a fact that I can count on one hand the number of 30-plus yard runs Clyde has had in his entire career. He just doesn't have it. And
is it 0?
No, it's definitely 1. It's definitely 1. He had the one where he was running and carrying the ball at the end of, I forget which game he was icing.
Yeah.
But that was like his first carry over 30 yards in his career. I think
it was the best play of his career.
I think it might literally be 1. I'll look it up while you're giving me your trash man. But yeah, just it's tough. I don't have anything against the guy personally. He seems like a nice guy, but he's not a good football player. And I wish the Chiefs would stop putting him on the field so we could stop. Listen, if the guy's inactive or he's not literally not getting carries in the game, we don't have to make him a trash man, but as long as he's out there, we got to do it.
We do, unfortunately. He, by the way, he did have a 52-yarder in that Chiefs-Chargers game where he sat down, and then a 31-yarder. And that was it.
Yep, that's it.
And the 31-yarder was against the Bills when we ran all over them. And he had maybe his second-best game after his first game.
2020, sure.
Exactly. So you're exactly right. Clyde is just not a home run hitter. He's a trash man. He is the 2023 version of Johnny Morton. We're just going to pencil him in here as a trash man until further notice because it just is unfortunate. It's unfortunate how his career is gone, and it's unfortunate that we still have to be subjected to Clyde handoffs in the year of our Lord 2023. I am going to say, for another guy that's kind of kicking him when he's down because he's out this week with an injury, Richie James, you can't fumble the kick or the punt like that. You can't let the Sun play you that bad. He hasn't been a factor this year at all on offense or on special teams. And in fact, he was a negative factor. He led directly to 3 potentially 7 Jaguars points in this game. Rich, I'm sorry, bud. I hope your knee gets better, and maybe that was what was causing you to not be a very good football player for the first 2 weeks. But trash man this week.
Good pick. I mean, it's tough when you lose ball in the sun, but if you lose ball in the sun, then you just got to figure out a way to get out of the way of the ball, right? You can't let it hit you like we talked about. Go to our wild cards. This is kind of this is a pretty close to an all-time wild card performance, and I'm talking about Jawan Taylor, the Chiefs' big offseason acquisition at right tackle. He obviously was a former Jaguar, had graded out one of the best pass blocking right tackles in the league. There was some talk of moving into left tackle until they picked up Donovan Smith. He has, through 2 games, 94 pass blocking snaps. He's allowed 2 pressures. Two pressures in 94 pass blocking snaps through 2 games. I mean, that's elite.
Incredible.
That's incredible. That's like Mitch Schwartz in the 2019
in his
Super Bowl run kind of performance in terms of not allowing pressures and let alone allowing sacks. But literally in this game alone, he had 5 penalties. Now, do I think that is all Jawan Taylor's fault? No. I don't, because I think it is mostly Chris Collinsworth and Mike Tirico's fault for raising such a big stink undeservedly about it on opening night on Thursday Night Football in the spotlight game of spotlight games, the 2023 season kickoff game. And there clearly was a target on his back in this game. I mean, the NFL
clearly,
it was reported the NFL was going to crack down on this week, but literally they were going to crack down on Jawan no matter what, and they repeatedly burned him in this game. And in fact, he earned himself a short stint on the bench just to make sure that he could keep his head straight. And Prince Tega Wanogho had to come in and play a couple of snaps, and I think it's great to see that he was able to bounce back from that, and he obviously came back in the very next drive, finished the game. Overall, aside from the penalties, had a great performance, and I really do think that, I don't know, either the NFL will continue to flag him 5 times a week until he adjusts, or, and I think this is probably what's more likely to happen, the NFL is going to, they're going to say, essentially, he's learned his lesson. We banged him 5 times in week 2. Everybody saw it. Everybody knew about it. Everybody complained. People complained. Chiefs fans complained about it. And I think they're going to kind of go back to, now, the flip side of that is the Chiefs do play a lot of primetime games. They play a lot of island games.
And playoff games after those.
There's always the possibility the NFL decides again that it needs to single out and make an example of Jawan Taylor. It's a shame, but the fact that he's continuing to play well despite the incredible scrutiny from NFL officiating is great to see. Wildcard performance from him.
I completely agree. I do hope the NFL doesn't do a little crackback block on him and catch him again later on in the year, but the whole narrative there, he was also playing in Jacksonville, where he spent the first 4 years of his career, and was certainly, I'm sure, amped, and I'm sure there were so many emotions going through his head about what just happened to him in the previous game and all the, the homecoming and all that stuff. And he's a young player. I mean, there was a lot going against him in that game, and to play as well as he played, given the circumstances, is remarkable. And it shows that, he's a hell of a football player. That was a good showing by him. Before I do my wild card, extra shout out to trashman referees from this game for not calling Zay Jones for, I don't know, a felony for what he did on the deep ball where he injured Brian Cook. I mean, it was just completely, it was as OPI as OPI could ever get. He rode him on his back to the ground and injured him so that he wouldn't catch what would have been
after face guarding him,
which would have been, and it would have been an easy interception. It was the most bullshit ticky-tack play by Zay Jones, I was very disappointed that he even thought that was the way that he should handle that. And then for the refs to not call anything there, just couldn't believe it. But my wild card for this game is Isaiah Pacheco. And wild card, again, capable of anything. I mean, 12 carries only, but for 70 yards, including that 31-yarder, he averaged 5.8 yards a clip, looked dynamic. I do think that he's an exciting player, and I do think that the Chiefs should, be happy that he's on the offense and he'll be contributing. But you just got to wonder, between the 7th round pedigree and the injury history so far and the way that he runs, if the Chiefs are worried about using him. Now, they also have Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid is also very famous for not using running backs that were more skilled than Isaiah Pacheco as much as he should have. But it just it's kind of a wild card role for him on the offense. Like, you don't know when Isaiah Pacheco is going to get the ball and pop a big one, because he doesn't get it very often. But when he does, he's fully capable of doing it. So certainly a wild card there. Hope we get to see more of those long 30-yard runs from him.
That's a wrap for week 2. Chiefs over Jags 17-9. Let's turn to week 3. The Chiefs are going to be taking on the 0-2 Chicago Bears. And boy, a lot of storylines to watch in this one, starting with the fact that the Bears are a raging dumpster fire. In addition to the fact that they are 0-2 and Justin Fields looks terrible, more on that in a minute. Bears defensive coordinator Alan Williams resigned today, Wednesday morning. In just a bizarre story. I wasn't online very much today, certainly much less than I usually am. And so there were rumors circulating this morning that his home and team property have been raided by the FBI. There was mention of child pornography. I don't know who makes these things up, if indeed these prove to be false, which it certainly seems like they are. Who's picking on Alan Williams? Like, why? To what end? What did he do to, random premium users on X to be the source of fake news and reporting like this? I just don't understand it. But in any case, the Bears have said that he resigned for health reasons, that he was having difficulty with his health, wanted to spend more time with his family. Matt Eberflus was going to be calling defensive plays. Their head coach was going to be calling defensive plays this week anyway, because he had been away from the team. But he is now completely gone. And at the same time, Justin Fields came out this morning, spoke to reporters. They asked him, kind of how he would describe how things have been going for him. He said he's playing too robotic, and then essentially blamed the coaching staff for putting too much information on his plate. They're giving him too much. He's being overcoached, was, the takeaway from this. Now, he came out and said, that's not what I meant.
Whoops.
And you had some former athletes, Mitch Schwartz and some others, jumping in his defense saying, like, see, this is why we don't give you interesting answers in press conferences, because you take everything out of context. No. The context was pretty clear on this one. Yep. That's what he said. He said what he meant, which is that he feels like the coaching staff is not doing a good job of coaching him. They're giving him too much information. Boy, yikes. This is an 0-2 team, by the way. Again.
They're fire. And Fields has come under fire for his processing. And if he's saying that he's getting too much information, and that's why when he stares at wide open receivers, he just freezes and doesn't run or doesn't throw the ball and just takes a sack, which is what he did last week. I mean, he was as bad as you can be last week. And
not good at all.
He now is the qualified worst quarterback in win percentage in NFL history. I think it's over 20 starts or whatever they qualified, because of course Deshaun Kaiser was 0-15 in his career and Brody Croy was 0-10. But Fields has now been playing a couple years and can't win football games, and that's not a good place to be in. The Bears also put their starting left tackle Braxton Jones on IR today, and that's not good when you're going up against a Chiefs pass rush that is kind of feeling themselves. And they also cut Nathan Peterman, so they had a day. They had a news day. They were, just everyone was talking about the Bears, and not in a good way. Not when you want people to talk about you and success and cool stuff you're doing. Everyone was just wondering what was going on in Chicago. So, I mean, storylines to watch here is, are the Bears going to be able to put their shit together in time to play the defending Super Bowl champs in Arrowhead? I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more later too, but I mean, it's always tough when you have an NFL team put in adversity like this. Will they respond? Will they crumble under the pressure? I mean, we frequently see teams rally around, a coach resigns for whatever reason, especially if it is legitimately because of health problems. You want to go win one for Allen,
Yeah,
but
sure.
there's
It's
also a
pretty.
talent issue, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. Matt Nagy versus the Bears revenge game. Was he a good head coach there? Was he bad? Do we know? I mean, is he a good offensive coordinator? Do we know? Do we even know what his contributions to the Chiefs offense have been? People have been saying the Chiefs offense misses Eric Bieniemy. He obviously just lit up the Broncos on Sunday in Denver. So, and the Chiefs were scoring 17 points against Jacksonville. So, convenient time for people to ask that question.
Sure.
It's an interesting. I mean, the answer is that Nagy was probably
yet.
fine, and he's probably a decent offensive coordinator, but we don't know anything. And, we're probably not going to know that much more on Sunday, but it is interesting to see, a former head coach that is much reviled by the fan base returning to play his old team.
Yeah, the Bears had a lot of fun when the Chiefs announced Matt Nagy was going to be promoted to offensive coordinator. They really thought that this was our downfall and that he really tanked them and was a reason that they, struggled as much as they did during his tenure there. But if you'll notice, they also struggled after his tenure. So I don't know, if they can
struggled
really
worse.
They're not a good franchise right now. They don't really have a lot of good direction and talent, and bless Ryan Poles for going over there and trying to clean stuff up. But I find it really interesting. I hope Nagy kind of pulls some stuff out, pulls some tricks out. I mean, with the help of Andy, of course, the greatest offensive mind in the game. But it is anytime you have a high profile revenge type of game, it's always interesting to see how they approach it, if they're going to treat it a little bit differently or not. We'll find out on Sunday, but I don't know. The way these Bears are going, maybe he feels bad. Maybe he's just going to put out a vanilla game plan and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, sure. Pity for the Bears. And honestly, can we really blame Matt Nagy for, not coaching Justin Fields the right way when Luke Getsy, his current offense coordinator, has called 2 designed runs all year in 2 games? For the best running quarterback, probably the best running quarterback in the NFL, and certainly not one of the better passing quarterbacks in the NFL. Let's talk about passing. Let's talk about when the Chiefs have the ball. You dropped a quote in here from Travis Kelce that I think really just sums up all we have to say about the Chiefs when they have the ball in this game.
We've got to start putting up fucking points as an offense, is what he said on New Heights. I mean,
that's it. That's what it is.
Yeah, he cut right to it. Got to start putting up fucking points. And especially for this team, that's their calling card of everything. Right. Now, it might turn into the Chiefs being their calling card, but it's certainly for the last 5 years has been video game type of numbers. 30 points a game in the last 5 years. The next highest in the NFL is 26. So, they're a chunk above everyone
4
else.
points per game.
More.
Better than any other team for 5 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's significant. And it speaks to, number one, Patrick Mahomes, and number 2, Andy Reid, back to back. I mean, 1 and 1A. Those guys, and Trav's been there the whole time, so you got to give him some love too. But he's right. The Chiefs have to start putting up points, and they have to start doing it now. I think they will. I feel like this is an offense that's just getting ready to break out. They are 12th in DVOA on offense, which, considering putting up 20 and 17 points in back-to-back weeks, is certainly not where I expected them. But again, DVOA doesn't just look at points per game. It looks at a lot of success rates and stuff like that.
And in particular, DVOA smooths out fumbles a lot.
Yeah, right.
Both in terms of losing the ball, and then once you put it on the ground, certainly whether you recover it or not, they essentially just flip a coin for that. And so if you've had bad fumble luck, the Chiefs have been on the wrong side of that through 2 games. So yeah, absolutely.
And the Bears, on the other hand, are 26th on defense.
Not good.
Haven't watched a ton of Bears tape, but pretty sure that is not too far from accurate. So, good Chiefs team that hasn't performed up to standards and that has one more week of Travis Kelce getting healthy and being pissed off against a 26th ranked Bears defense. I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to predict anymore. I did predict that Chiefs Jags game was going to be a low scoring one, and I was pretty proud of nailing that prediction. But boy, this thing just has all the makings of the Chiefs doing whatever they want on offense.
Definitely. And let's hope that that is in fact the case, because again, there's a lot of weirdness surrounding this game that frequently leads to weird games. Chiefs only play weird games, as our friend Seth Kaiser would say. When the Bears have the ball, the Bears are 30th in offensive DVOA. The Chiefs are 19th so far on defensive DVOA through 2 weeks. They were
crazy.
29th after week 1, which is pretty wild considering that they only allowed 2 offensive touchdowns. And I mean, I don't know. It was surprising to me that they were 29th after week 1. DVOA hasn't quite normalized yet because it doesn't know what teams are good yet, because it's
Join
week
the club.
2. So, right, exactly. So we don't know exactly, but obviously to go from 29th to 19th in 1 week is a huge, massive performance. That's all bolstered by the Jags game. I think the eye test so far for this defense says that it is much better than 19th in the league. My question for you would be, how good is it going to be? And I guess specifically, how good is it going to be against Justin Fields and this broken Bears offense in this game?
It just feels like they're hitting the ground running this year. Much more so than the offense, which has done the opposite. Whatever, hit the ground and explode, or whatever they've done. The defense has come out against 2 dynamic offenses with, Goff's obviously a number 1 overall quarterback, and so is Trevor Lawrence. Not that Goff's really played like it, but he's been good. He's been fine.
He's been good.
And obviously they have some great pieces in Detroit. They have a good line. They were a really, really good offense last year. And then the Jags had tons of weapons. They added Calvin Ridley. They've got young dynamic running back. Trevor Lawrence has taken a step up. All the makings of 2 teams that should have been able to light the Chiefs defense up if the Chiefs defense wasn't very good, which clearly they showed that they've got some dogs on that side. And so, I mean, how good are they? I mean, you could pretty easily say that if they're have some good injury luck, as in don't get some key injuries on defense, that they look like a potentially top 5 defense in the NFL. I mean, that's their in their bag, doing everything they're supposed to do. They're not quite your Niners and Eagles and kind of some of those other big boy defenses, but they're pretty much right there. They looked awesome in these first 2 games.
They did. And it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, obviously when you hold 2, by most metrics, top 6, top 7 offenses from last year to, a total of
23,
23 points and, two touchdowns in 2 games.
And 3 of those for the Jags was on a 3 and out when they got the ball in the red zone. So, I mean, they've been awesome.
And that, now getting to go against one of the worst offenses in the league, it does have all the makings of a classic Chiefs blowout, but the NFL rarely works out like we expect. Just a couple of quick notes on Justin Fields. The 2 areas where he's actually been pretty good this year, the red zone, he's got a 90.7 PFF grade, which is second among all quarterbacks. He's 5 of 7 for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns, a 135.7 passer rating, which is actually first in the NFL in quarterbacks in the red zone. And he's been pretty good on deep throws. Throws 20 plus yards downfield. He's 5 of 6 for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is a perfect 158.3 passer rating. And obviously, deep passes, you're getting baked into that, a high yard per completion, which does factor into passer rating. But he hasn't made any mistakes. He hasn't turned the ball over. When he is not blitzed, though, and these numbers are crazy, he is 27 of 47, which is 57.4% completion percentage. That's John Elway territory. 4.9 yards per attempt and 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. The only quarterback in the NFL that has been worse when not blitzed is Zach Wilson, who is obviously
famously said he's seeing ghosts.
Famously is absolutely terrible at playing quarterback. Steve Spagnuolo currently has the 8th highest blitz rate in the league. He's been utterly insane the first 2 weeks in a good way. And, Spags, we usually see a late season Spags surge. We've seen it right out of the gate. I mean, if we're getting a Spags surge on top of the first 2 games of the season and the game plans that we've seen so far, yikes for everyone else in the league. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they approach this Bears offense. It probably are going to blitz significantly less. Justin Fields currently has the second highest sack rate in the league, 13%. Daniel Jones is the only quarterback higher. He's at 13.2%. And that was against, obviously, he played that game against Dallas. Where they literally were getting they had an 80% win rate on the defense. I mean, they were just utterly beclowning his offensive line on every single snap. He still only has a 0.2 higher sack percentage than Justin Fields. I think the Chiefs have the opportunity in this game to turn in a dominant offensive and defensive performance and dominate this game. So the X factors, here we are, coaches stepped away. Feels like a classic trope, but I got to tell you, the lure is strong to say this is going to be like a 3-point Chiefs win.
Isn't it? That's just, we've seen some of these games come up on the schedule before and been like, okay, lick their chops.
We're going to score 50.
This is where the Chiefs come out and play a full game. But sometimes, and especially if you're really good, you kind of need to get challenged. Yeah. You just get bored with teams that aren't as good as you. And I think that's been a pretty easy marker to say about the Chiefs over the last couple of years, is they do tend to get bored. They tend to not see the threat of the other team when honestly the other team isn't threatening. When
they like to fuck around.
They do, and they very rarely find out, as you said. I don't think that the Bears are in a mental position to really challenge the Chiefs, but I do see the potential for one of those Chiefs do a bunch of dumb stuff games, which they've had 2 of those. So can they really just keep doing a bunch of dumb stuff every game themselves that really has nothing to do with the other team, dropping passes and fumbling the ball and things where the other team just goes, whoa, thanks. We had no business being in this game, but you have given that right to us. I don't know. A juiced Arrowhead crowd after a big road win where the Chiefs have smelled blood in the water with all these other teams that aren't, only 2 other teams in the AFC even have a better record than them. I just feel like they're gonna seize the moment and probably win this thing pretty comfortably.
That's what I think too. We'll see you guys next week. It's always sunny in Chiefs Kingdom.